Are you a lifelong fan of General Hospital?
Are you a new fan who wants to know more about the history of the show?
Do you enjoy talking about the show with others?
Do you find yourself yelling at the TV?
Is your self-care an hour a day in Port Charles?
If so, we invite you to join hosts
Amanda Kimmel
and Shannon Coach at the place where all the hidden conversations take place and secrets are revealed.
Meet us at Pier 54,
a General Hospital fan podcast.
Hello.
Hi.
Welcome to the Port Charles 411, part 7
Yep.
of Lila. Cool. All right. So last week we left off with Felicia and Luke realizing that Edward and Lila don't want those letters, the content of the letters, to be found out.
I mean, it is problematic that Chloe has them memorized.
I know.
You can't just slip one out of order and be like, oh, one got lost. No, Chloe has it committed to memory.
And at what point, though, like, okay, you're in love with these letters, but you also know that this woman and man are still alive. Why wouldn't you just try to get them to them?
Right. That's the part I don't understand. Why did Felicia have to reach out and be like, hey, why didn't Chloe? I mean, she's a world-renowned fashion designer. She has the money to come to Port Charles.
Right.
But okay.
Yep. Well, whatever. So we're going to pick up back at the Quartermaine mansion where Lila sits in the parlor rereading her old love letters as Edward watches from the doorway. This is where they were so cute.
We're so cute.
Lila stops looking concerned that something she read may be construed as damaging. On May 19th, Lila and Felicia, and that was back in April too. May 19th, Lila and Felicia discuss Lila's memoirs. Lila remembers Edward as the most romantic man she had ever encountered, which is just so cute. She knew that he was the love of her life. They began to discuss the letters when Lila offers to read through them and sort out the letters that Felicia will find the most useful. Mm-hmm. Felicia coyly responds that she doesn't want to be cheated out of one word of those love letters. Privacy, Felicia. I understand it's her memoirs, but she's being more than generous. Later, Edward calls his judge friend, asking for an unscheduled visit to Jason's by a court-appointed officer. Lila overhears the conversation and demands to speak with the judge. Lila makes it clear that Michael is safe at Jason's and no visits are necessary. Felicia shows up at Luke's to tell him about the strange occurrences at the Quartermaines. She explains how since Chloe's arrival, Edward's mood has become monstrous. Monstrous, yeah. At first, Luke doesn't think she has anything. Just because your life starts with poetry doesn't mean things won't change. But Felicia knows that there is something wrong there, that there's something there. She daydreams of herself as Lila and Luke as Edward.
Mm-hmm.
Luke offers to help Felicia find out the truth about the Quartermaines and kisses her hand just as he had done in her dream. Chloe is hiding out when Edward once again tracks her down. She is relieved when Felicia interrupts to introduce her to Luke. Edward is not happy to be interrupted, particularly by Luke. Chloe offers to get them a glass of champagne. After she leaves, Edward tells Felicia that he thinks she is taking advantage of her role as Lila's confidant. Bringing Luke into this house is a perfect example. Felicia offers to talk to Lila, but Edward insists that is not necessary. Luke asks if he offends Edward's poetic sensibilities. Edward angrily tells Luke that the letters were not meant for public viewing. This is giving off Ben Affleck and J-Lo vibes. Have you seen that where so she made that album and then the movie, The Best Love Story Never Told, it's based on Ben's love letters to her. So she brought them to her writing team and producers, and they're reading it to the point where they gave him the nickname Ben Affleck. Like he's never written anything before, like Good Will Hunting or any other movie. But anyway, so they're giving him a really, really hard time about it. And he's in this documentary. I haven't seen the whole thing. I've just seen what I've seen on TikTok, but I've seen this clip enough where he's like, I'm talking to her and he's like, you say it's the greatest love story never told, but you're
telling it.
Reading out all of these letters kind of feels like you're telling it. So, yeah. Mm-hmm. They must have watched GH.
I guess so.
The letters are merely relics of another time. There is nothing wrong with them except for Felicia's mistaken idea that she has the right to broadcast them to the world at large. As Edward storms off in a huff, Luke tells Felicia that the old coot is definitely worried. At the cues, Luke tells Felicia that the most obvious move now is to get the letters. Felicia says that she will just ask Lila, but Luke thinks that is a bad idea. Lila is too loyal to Edward after all these years. Edward is already suspicious, and they certainly don't want him to hire a private detective to follow them around. He tells Felicia that he will come up with something else, and he asks her if she wants to get some air, and they go out on the terrace. And then, like, in the middle of all this is when Lila wound up giving her proxy to Chloe, and she started, like, voting against Edward for stuff with ELQ, because Edward was trying to influence Chloe, but then she wasn't. She was doing what, you know, a proxy should do and what the person who gave you that proxy's best interest would be. And then at Luke's, Felicia is still reluctant to go along with Luke's plan to get the letters. Lila trusts her. She should just ask for them. Luke says that she could ask, but she probably wouldn't get all the letters. Felicia doesn't understand why Edward is so concerned with her seeing the letters. Even if Lila wouldn't give them to her, Chloe practically has them memorized. Luke says that Chloe may not know what to look for, but obviously Edward thinks that Luke or Felicia would. He tells Felicia that he is only trying to help, and if she wants him to back off, he will. So then the following week of May 24th or 28th of 1999, Soap Central just jumps to July. Like, I kept clicking on the link. I kept searching it so many different ways, and the link that says this week, when you click on it, it jumps to July. There is no, and even as you're moving, like, to the next week, it moves to July. So I have no idea. The only thing I could kind of piece together was that Felicia and Luke continue to look for the letters, obviously. And Felicia had a black and white version of herself and Luke, like a, you know, the dream and everything, as they were Edward and Lila when they were younger. And this happens again in another spot where, but actually Soap Central says due to technical difficulties, it's in there somewhere. So if you wind up reading it, it's a week that they don't have the notes on.
Oh,
just because they lost it. I know.
They're not allowed to do
No.
We need them.
That's not my research.
Right?
Like, come on.
So then on June 2nd, Felicia tells Luke that they may be on the wrong track. These letters just show love. Luke tells her that maybe she's looking at them the wrong way. If she reads them like a romance novel, she will never find out what is hidden in them. He wants to read her half of the letters and see if he can find anything. Luke thinks that maybe the secret isn't Edward's, but Lila's. Felicia says that Lila would never do anything wrong. Luke asks why not. Some of the letters are missing from a 3-week period. Something is up. Lila might not have sent them to Eleanor so people wouldn't find out what their secret was. Felicia swears to find the truth. Felicia prepares a picnic 50s style for Mac. She tells Mac that Edward and Lila have something to hide. Mac asks how they got the letters and is upset at the breaking and entering story. Felicia tells him that she needs the truth for her story and Luke needs the distraction from Lucky, but she will not write anything that will hurt anyone. Mac and Felicia sit watching the sky, and Felicia tells him that she understands how Lila must have felt, worrying about Edward going off to war. She feels the same way every day that Mac goes to work. He tells her that nothing will happen to him. You can't guarantee that, Mac.
No.
June 9th, Felicia sits in the office at Luke's, having just broken in. Luke comes in to find her and asks if he needs to find a new locksmith. She tells him that she has to keep in practice. The letters are still in Oyster Bay and they are going to have to go back for them. Luke thanks Felicia for the invitation, but says that he typically does not return to the scene of the crime, especially when he was caught. Something happened here, but due to the special report, it was missed. Felicia tells Luke that the last thing she wants is to hurt someone. Maybe she will interview some of the people who worked for Lila and Edward back then and see where she and Lila had left off. Luke excuses himself and Felicia daydreams. She is Lila and Luke is Edward, dancing to the sound of a band playing in the background. June 11th in Oyster Bay, Felicia is trying to pick the lock at the Q's home. She is concerned that they are going to be caught, but Luke taunts her into continuing. Besides, he thinks the caretaker will be busy swizzling booze for at least another couple of hours. Felicia is delighted and Luke is impressed when she successfully picks the lock. They start to search for the missing letters and for some clue as to the identity of the mysterious caretaker. At the Q's home, Luke and Felicia have not been successful in their search for the letters or the name of the caretaker. They search the bookcase for some clues and come across a book with the name Reginald Jennings Sr. Felicia points out that the caretaker is too old to be Reggie's father, so there must be another one. Lila's Reginald is probably the third. Luke says that would explain why the current Reginald puts up with so much. Luke says that this mystery is too good to abandon. Felicia agrees and they decide to keep looking for the letters. As she continues to search, she looks up and is horrified when she sees the caretaker returning. She jumps onto a very surprised Luke's back and orders him to hide in the closet. At the Q's home, Felicia and Luke stop for a moment to ponder the fire in the fireplace. Felicia comments that the caretaker was staring at it, and it seems strange that he would light a fire in the middle of summer. Luke discovers fragments of the letters in the fire. He puts out the fire and tries to recover what is left of the letters. There isn't much. Felicia is extremely disappointed. Luke opens the letter and reads the only part that isn't burned. He and Felicia think it's odd that in the letter, Edward is apparently telling Lila not to spend so much time at the cemetery. June 14th, at the Quartermaine mansion, Lila wants to know what Edward is trying to hide, and after she gently prods him, he reluctantly admits that Luke and Felicia have been snooping around Oyster Bay. Edward then reveals that Jennings Jr. burned Lila's letters, which delights Lila. Meanwhile, Luke and Felicia are indeed at the Quartermaine property at Oyster Bay, reading portions of one of Lila's burned letters. Upon discovering a clue about a cemetery, Luke and Felicia decide to take their investigation a step further, and the pair head over to the cemetery. Poking around the Quartermaine mausoleum, Felicia uncovers the grave of a baby Jennings. She abruptly decides that the investigation has reached its conclusion, which shocks Luke. When he is unwilling to wrap things up so neatly and hastily, Felicia tells him that she does not have any intention of hurting Lila. Luke is saddened by the reminder of a lost child as he struggles to understand the complexities of heaven. June 23rd, Luke and Felicia talk about the grave they discovered at Oyster Bay. Luke tells Felicia that he has done some research and the baby is not Lila and Edward's. The baby belonged to Reginald Sr. and his wife Lucinda. Felicia tells Luke that she can't do this anymore. She promised Lila that she could be trusted, and since then she has broken into her home, stolen from her, and lied. She cannot continue with this. Luke understands and says that he can respect that. She will not do one more thing to hurt Lila. Felicia says that they just got caught up in a mystery and that it is a mystery that Lila wants to keep hidden. Luke asks if she can really go without knowing what's in those letters. He cannot, so he will continue on his own. Felicia tries to convince Luke that since it was she that brought him aboard, that she was quitting, he must also. Luke disagrees. He explains that he has agreed to not harm Lila when they were working as a team, but now that he is on his own, he cannot make such promises. He may be inclined to take everything he learns right into the Quartermaine mansion and reveal it all. It was only Felicia that was able to temper him. Felicia agrees to continue with the project as long as Luke promises to protect Lila. The next day, Felicia goes to Lila and tells her that she broke into the Oyster Bay house. Lila told her that she knew and didn't like finding out secondhand. Lila said they would still work on the book, but she didn't have the time today. She gave Felicia a box of things to look at. Felicia went straight to Luke with them. She told him that she was honest with Lila, but doesn't think Lila was honest with her. They found a picture in the box of Lila, Edward, and Elliot. They were supposed to notice how much Edward and Elliot looked alike. After Felicia leaves, Luke studies the letters. All of them were signed Love Edward, but the one found half burnt in Oyster Bay, it was signed Love E. Luke is very interested.
Yeah.
Luke and Felicia are still sifting through Lila's photos. Felicia is amazed at the similarities between Edward and Elliot. Luke and Felicia figure out by the dates on the letters and the postmarks on the burned letter that Edward could not have written the burned one. The charred letter was signed E instead of Edward and was postmarked from an army base before Edward supposedly joined. Week of June 28th, due to technical difficulties, there was no recaps available. July 5th, after finding...
It did say we apologize for the inconvenience.
It did. July 5th, after finding 2 skulls in the Quartermaine crypt, Luke suggests to Felicia that the second skull might belong to someone who was placed in the crypt after being murdered. July 9th, Luke is in his office searching for something when Felicia arrives. She asks Luke if Tony is there yet and is disappointed to learn that he isn't. They are both anxious to hear what Tony has to say about the skulls they found in the Quartermaine crypt. Felicia is also nervous about having the skulls in the first place. It makes her feel like a criminal. Felicia is delighted when Tony arrives and demands to know what he found out, even though she is sure it's nothing. Tony smiles and says that he wouldn't be so sure. Carly tells Jason that Lila is teaching her all about roses. She never thought she would enjoy something like gardening, but she really does. And then you made the comment, why don't we see Carly keeping roses in honor of Lila?
I just feel like that would make sense.
That would make sense. Luke and Felicia.
Especially at the Metro Court. Like,
right.
We know that the Quartermaines have Lila's rose garden, but have roses dedicated to Lila.
That would be beautiful.
That would be.
Luke and Felicia have snuck back into the Quartermaine crypt to replace the skulls. Luke says they can leave, but Felicia says in a minute. When she starts to pray, Luke excuses himself, saying his atheism is kicking in. Once Felicia finishes her prayer, she and Luke start to leave, but the door slams shut, locking them in the crypt.
On July 12th in the crypt, Luke and Felicia discover that they are trapped. Luke's cell phone has, of course, run out of battery. To worsen the situation, Felicia reveals that she only told her husband that she and Luke went to Oyster Bay, not that they planned to visit the cemetery. Luke takes advantage of the opportunity to unveil his theory that Edward killed Elliot. Felicia has a fantasy where she saw herself as Lila and Luke as Edward. Felicia admitted to Luke that he reminded her of Edward and remained hopeful that Mac would find them. They attempt to bolster each other's spirits and share stories of near-death experiences, which I'm sure at this point both of them have a lot of. Edward swore to Mac that he had nothing to do with Luke and Felicia's disappearance. Tony confessed to Mac that he had examined 2 skulls for Luke and Felicia and gave Mac a clue to their whereabouts. July 16th in the Q crypt, Felicia wakes up in Luke's arms and tells him about a wonderful dream she had. She feels bad because Mac wasn't the man in her dreams. She tearfully asks, what if it's her last dream? As she starts to cry harder, Luke takes her into his arms for a comforting hug.
Ugh.
Felicia tearfully thanks Luke for not trying to force her to see the silver lining. Luke agrees that their chances of getting out of the crypt are getting slimmer. He tells her that if this is it for him, he should be thanking her. She coaxed him onto the life raft when he was drowning. She saved his life. Felicia tells Luke that she knows how he felt when Lucky died because of almost losing Maxie. Luke says that so many people tried to help, but she came and got him and held on to him. If her face is the last one he ever sees, he could have done worse. As they continue to comfort one another and come apologizingly close to a kiss, the door of the crypt starts to creak. Mac walks in carrying a flashlight, asking if anyone is home. Felicia runs over to Mac and gives him a big hug. Luke offers a little smile and a wave. Felicia apologizes for not telling Mac everything in the first place. Felicia leaves with the other rescue workers, leaving Mac and Luke alone. Mac is clearly not pleased with Luke. He is furious with Luke for putting Felicia in danger. He can't believe that he actually encouraged Felicia to help Luke with his grief over Lucky. Luke turned her into a grave robber. Then he almost satisfied his own death wish. Mac angrily tells Luke that he doesn't get to play with Felicia anymore. She is off limits to him. Felicia walks up and asks if everything is okay. Mac says that he was just debriefing Luke. Luke concurs and then walks away. Mac and Felicia follow him out of the crypt. Safely at home, Felicia apologizes to Mac again. She also tells him that he can't blame Luke because she went along with everything. She is the first to admit that she didn't think about the consequences of her own actions. Mac says that he is okay with her being her own woman, but he is not okay with Luke risking her life. He asks if she has had enough of this whole thing. Felicia promises not to do anything to endanger herself. Mac takes that as a no to his question about Felicia being ready to give up Lila's memoirs. He says that he has something that might help and hands her an envelope full of Elliot's letters. Luke is on the dock, skipping rocks into the water when Felicia finds him. Luke is happy but surprised to see her. She gleefully tells him that Mac came through a little on the research for her. She thinks that she might be able to identify the other body in the Quartermaine crypt. On July 19th, on the docks, Luke tells Felicia that the future of the investigation is in her hands. In response, Felicia hands Luke Elliot's passport. Luke explains his theory about the Quartermaine past to his partner in crime. Edward killed George when he threatened to disinherit him and then eliminated his competition, Elliot. Edward then returned to a grieving Lila for one night of passion before joining the Navy. Felicia is reluctant to buy into Luke's theory because she does not view Edward and Lila as capable of murder. Edward, I definitely do.
Mm-hmm.
Felicia and Luke depart after arranging to make another trip to Oyster Bay as Faison watches from the shadows. And my husband is nowhere to be.
Oh, I was waiting for him to like jump. We should have timed that.
I know.
So like he jumps out and was like, Faison!
Right. At the Quartermaine mansion, Lila tells Edward that Luke and Felicia were found safely. When Lila asks her husband why he hasn't gone upstairs to bed, he reveals that he was reading their old love letters. Felicia finds Mac at the hospital and asks for his help once he is able to return home. Once again, Faison lurks in the shadows, watching as Felicia makes her way to her car in the hospital garage. Felicia tells Mac that she and Luke must return to Oyster Bay and finish the investigation. Mac reluctantly agrees, but after Felicia leaves, Mac calls Taggart and places a tail on his wife. Remember Taggart, guys?
Love him.
July 22nd, Luke discovers the murder weapon used to kill Elliot in the Quartermaine crypt. Later, Felicia told Luke that she would confront Edward about the murder and imagine how Edward had committed the crime. The next day, Felicia arrives at Luke's just as he has finished shaving his whole head and face. Felicia says that he hates what Edward did, but she is glad that she slept on it before confronting him. She doesn't want to do anything to hurt Lila. Luke, in his Luke-like way, suggests to Felicia that they just send Edward a note telling them that they know but won't tell.
Really?
You want to pick up?
Luke's ridiculous.
Right? Let's just write him a note.
Yeah. Because that doesn't sound threatening at all. I know, but I won't tell anyone.
Right.
Luke and Felicia are preparing to go to the queues to confront Edward. Felicia thinks the timing is good because Lila won't be home. Luke can't believe that Lila wouldn't have known all these years, but Felicia can't believe that she would have stayed with Edward for so long if she did. Lila wouldn't live with a man she knew was a murderer. Luke rhetorically asked Felicia if that means a woman couldn't love a man who is a stone's throw away from upstanding. That is bad news for him. What is worse, though, is when the woman says she can and then doesn't. On that somber note, they hear the cues. Okay, Luke, calm down. Luke and Felicia have arrived at the queues. Edward assumes they are there to talk about money since Lila isn't home. He assumes they want money for expenses related to Lila's memoirs. Felicia tells Edward to put away his checkbook. This isn't about money, although these memories may be more expensive than any of them could have dreamed. Edward demands to know what Felicia is talking about. Felicia tells him that it is about Elliot Thompson, the man he murdered. At the queues, Edward tries to brush off Felicia and Luke, but they proceed to show them everything that they have uncovered. They explain that they know that Edward took Elliot's place in the service, but Edward tells them that they are being ridiculous. Luke tells Edward that they have enough of a letter that Edward wrote to Lila while posing as Elliot. He is sure that a handwriting analysis would confirm things. Felicia says that they know the rest. Luke is explaining his theory of what happened to Edward. We see the same flashback from earlier in the week when Felicia was imagining the scenario. Edward tells Felicia and Luke they are both gifted storytellers, but this is only their version of what happened over 50 years ago. Who can really say? Luke pulls out the fire poker and says that this can say Edward is shocked, to say the least. Edward is angry that his father's grave has been desecrated. He can't believe that Luke and Felicia would go to such lengths. Edward admits that he killed Elliot. Of course he killed Elliot. He hated the man. There was no way he would let Elliot get anywhere near Lila. As Edward is confessing to Luke and Felicia, Lila enters the room. She tells Edward that she can't let him do this. Dun, dun, dun. On July 26th, at the Quartermaine mansion, Lila will not let Edward take the blame for Elliot's murder. Lila then confesses that it was she who killed Edward's lookalike. Edward repeatedly interrupts and attempts to make light of the situation, asserting that a 60-year-old secret needn't be disturbed now. At Luke's insistence, Edward describes the events that preceded the murder. Evidently, Edward's father was understanding and supporting of the burgeoning romance between his son and Lila. Lila eventually takes over, describing the exact circumstances of the murder. The night that she killed Elliot, she had made a trip to the Quartermaine home at Oyster Bay. Unbeknownst to her, Elliot had followed her to her lover's property and was more than dismayed to discover his fiancée waiting for the love of another man. When he confronted her and tried to force himself on her, Lila killed him with the fireplace tool. Later, when Edward arrived, he would not permit his love to call the police because self-defense was not a credible defense in those days. The remaining pieces of the fireplace set were then given to Jennings Sr., and Edward soon left to join the Navy. When Luke and Felicia inquired as to why they were kept locked in the crypt, Reginald enters the room and confesses to having sealed the crypt door shut. The gentleman then reveals that Jennings Sr. aided Edward in placing Elliot's body in the drawer with George's. When Edward asks Luke and Felicia if he should contact his attorneys, both Felicia and Luke promise never to say a word about the Quartermaine secret.
And I don't think they have. I really don't think that it's been mentioned since. So, told you it was going to be juicy. Lila killed someone.
But he deserves it. He was trying to force himself on her.
Right,
Just
exactly.
because she's your fiance doesn't mean you get to do that, man.
No, that's definitely a thing.
So, good for Lila for standing up for herself. And Edward for helping take care of her.
Right.
He was so sweet at times.
He was. I mean, he loved Lila. Even when he disagreed with her, he's like, dang it.
Yep.
You're right. But yeah, so that was it about the letters and the mystery. But there's still more. So next week we will have week 8 of Lila. We're winding down because we know that she unfortunately passed away in 2004 and this was 1999. So
yes,
we're coming to the end, but I'm glad that they gave her that storyline though too, because as we've seen over the past few weeks, she really hasn't had her own storyline, like not like this, Puckalila's great, getting the Quartermaines out of whatever mess they're in is great, but this was great.
It was
all Lila.
I love Lila.
Me too. So join us on Monday as we recap this week's shows.
Have a good weekend,
and we'll meet at the pier. Bye.
If you enjoyed today's show, we invite you to go to pier54podcast.com to subscribe on your favorite platform. Don't forget to leave us a review.
And you can also follow us on many social media channels. Just search for Pier 54 Podcast. Also, we are not perfect, so if there is something that we missed or messed up, just let us know by emailing us at pier54podcast@gmail.com.